The meditation of my heart be ever mindful of thee, O Lord, my strength and my salvation.
Amen.
Would you please be seated? One of the things John Bordeaux tells me, yes, John, I'm talking about you. One of the things John tells me is that my mouth is going to get me in trouble. And it usually does. And I did it again yesterday. We had an Easter egg hunt. For our first Sunday, our first Easter service was the children's service. Yesterday afternoon we had an Easter egg hunt, and we had, it seemed like at least 1,000 children under the age of 5, but it was only maybe 2,000-3,000. And they're all running around, but we all started off here in the church, and the baskets were distributed, and I gave a little homily, and we got through that okay. Then we went out and had the Easter egg hunt, and then we had a little reception in the parish hall. And most of the children came from the local Head Start school, which we have sort of partnered with. And so most of the people, the parents, hardly any of them were Episcopalian. And so this is an opportunity for people to ask about the Episcopal Church. Now, we do this not as a marketing drive. We do this as a service to the people in the community. But nonetheless, when people ask about the Episcopal Church, I want to give a good impression. And here's where my mouth gets me in trouble. So this woman says to me, now what exactly is the difference between you and the Catholic Church? And I said, well, very similar. This afternoon, before the services, we're hearing confessions in my office, if you'd like to make confession. So yes, we Episcopalians, we will hear confessions from priests. And the rule in our church is, all may, none must, and I'm looking at you, Dick, some should. So it's, in other words, we have the same liturgical form, but it is not a requirement. And she said, well, what else is there? I said, well, you see this woman over here? That's my wife, Susan. In the Catholic Church, she would be called my housekeeper. And that, I think, may not have sealed the deal. I don't know. It didn't seem to go down at that point. But Easter is a sort of a culmination of we have the Holy, we start on Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday, and we hear confessions where the Easter Vigil, we usually throw in an Easter egg hunt or some sort of children's thing, and then we culminate on Easter morning. And what exactly are we talking about? Well, it's how I explained it to the children yesterday, is we have Easter eggs. And do you know where Easter eggs came from? And I love, especially I enjoy children personally. It's one of the things I like, and they seem to respond well to me. And they're all looking up at me with eyes of glowing, sort of like, not like Dick, but other people. And I say, the Easter egg is an ancient Christian tradition. In the early church in Mesopotamia, in the Eastern Orthodox churches, the early church created a tradition of they would take an egg of a chicken and they would cut out the little end and drain the yolk out and dry the shell. And then they would paint the outside. And on Easter morning, they would take the egg and they'd crack it. And at that point, all the little boys who had their Easter eggs already began to take the eggs out and mock the kid next to them. And when they'd open it, the cracked egg, there'd be nothing there. And that symbolized the empty tomb. Now, we Americans improved on that tradition, and we've inserted candy and yo-yos and all these sorts of things in there. But the Easter egg is a tradition that goes back to the very earliest dawn of the Christian world. I had a harder time explaining Peter Cottontail and the Easter Bunny, but I tried. But what we're here today to talk about is that empty tomb. That empty egg. That's why that symbol, at the very beginning of the Christian church, has stuck around for almost 1,800 years. What happened on Easter morning was that the tomb was empty. let's look at our first gospel reading. We've got two to choose from. We've got John and Matthew, and our deacon Mike read John this morning. And one of the things, as those of you who know me know that I love to digress, and I'm urging to digress, so we need to stay on point, Do you ever remember the Philadelphia Bulletin? Evening newspaper in Philadelphia? Remember evening newspapers? They used to have such things. When I would go up and visit my wife when we were dating, she lived in a big, rambling house in the suburbs of Philadelphia. One of these huge 3-story stone things with a slate roof, and it had two floors of bedrooms, and there were some rooms that, well, that's Uncle Billy's room. He went off to the Korean War and never came back, so it's just been left like that. And nowadays they have this show called American Pickers where people go and find all these things, and you go, I never knew that would be worth that much. But for me, it was like doing that, because I would go into this house, and I'd hear, George, you have this room, and there's the bathroom, and I'd open the cabinet drawer, and there'd be a jar of Pepsodent tooth powder, and Burma Shave, and Brill Cream, and I thought, man, this is like Life magazine in the 1940s. And in the basement were stacks of old newspapers and magazines. I think they were planning on having the fire eventually, but it hadn't happened yet. And across the Philadelphia Bulletin, which was the evening newspaper, and it's long been out of business, was the headline, Everybody reads the Bulletin. Everybody who was anybody read the Bulletin. And I'd like to think that people at Shepherd of the Hills read the Shepherd Staff. Anybody who's anybody reads the Shepherd Staff. And in this month's edition, I said, read the Gospels. Read these passages about what's happening and compare the different ones. And I said, if I give that advice, I better take it myself. I can only get away with my children telling them to do something and not doing it myself. But if you compare the 4 gospel accounts of what's going on, what you're going to find is these things don't really match up. Just little things like if we look at John's gospel in our flyer, early on the first day of the week while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb. What time is it? It's still dark. Who went? Mary. Let's turn the page and look at Matthew. After the Sabbath, at the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to the tomb. What time was it? It was morning. Who went? Mary and Mary. And Luke and Mark are each different in that way. One's at dawn, one's before dark, before it gets light. They're all slightly different. And who was there? Mary and Mary. Mary and Salome and another person. All the women. Each of them is slightly different as to time and to who is there. But they all report the same thing, that these women went there 1, 2, 3, 5, with the expectation that they were going to do their duty. They were going to anoint this body, that they were going to take care of things. They had to bury it quickly because it was Friday and the Sabbath was going to start, and you couldn't do anything on the Jewish Sabbath. So they needed to get this done. And now, the next Sunday, they're going basically to make sure everything's fine, to tidy up. And they arrive at the tomb. And the door's open. And now each of the Gospels is a slightly different account. 1 angel, 2 angels. But the story is the same. The door is open. And Mary runs back to tell the disciples. Now, I have not run in about 25 years. The only people I see running are these awful adults who try to lose weight by running, and the children in the Easter egg hunt. I mean, it was like, at the start of a marathon, holding them back until I say go, and they're all running. And running for adults is really a modern phenomenon. You didn't really run. And Mary is running. Now she's running, not because of the joy of finding an Easter egg, but something is And she tells Peter, and in our gospel from this morning, John's gospel, Peter and the other beloved disciple, whose name is John. John's talking about John, and he's being modest by not naming himself. But John's a bit macho because he and Peter ran, but we know who got there first. John won the race. And he repeats that 2 or 3 times in this passage. So he doesn't name himself, but he does say, I won that foot race. And they run. Run, not in joy, but in panic, in fear. And what's happened now? Everything that they had hoped for, everything that they thought was going to be, all of the things that they knew. In fact, John and Peter couldn't even stay at the cross. They had to buck out. They couldn't be. It was up to Mary and the women to be there from the beginning to the end. They couldn't take it. And now they've got to go to the tomb because it's empty. And Peter, John is a little more cautious. He gets there first, he tells us 3 times. But he doesn't go in. Peter, who catches up, runs in, looks, sees the clothes. Now, and it begins to hit Peter. It begins to hit Peter because what he sees is not, if you will, the clothes tossed to one side. What he sees are this angel, one of the 2 angels, one at either end of the place where Jesus was laid, and the clothes laying exactly as they had been if Jesus' body were there. In other words, grave robbers. If grave robbers had come, they wouldn't have taken the body. They would have taken the valuable grave clothes and spices. But instead, the body's gone, and what's gone and what's been left are the clothes as if Jesus had somehow risen out of them. Somebody either had taken the time to lay these things exactly the way Jesus was when he was in them, or something else has happened. The tomb is empty. And over the coming chapters, verses in the Bible, the disciples began to get it. It's almost as if they start to think, all this stuff about his saying, this temple must be destroyed and I will rise again in 3 days. Oh yeah, is that what he was talking about? Or the psalmist says, he will come, but his body will not corrupt. All the things that they had heard and they had listened to, all the things that were sort of there, which were sort of in the back of their head, jostling with, who's going to be the chief disciple? Who's going to win the foot race? Who is going to be at the right hand of God? All the sort of human broken failings that the disciples lived with day in, day out, the failings you and I have as people, all of a sudden were pushed back. And the tomb was empty. This, in the early days, those who were against the Christians, Jewish apologists, they did not, the issue was not whether the tomb was empty. The Jewish apologists accused the early Christians of stealing the body. The issue wasn't whether the tomb was empty. The issue was what happened. Where did that body go? And that body, by the end of the day, was shown to all of the disciples, the glorified, risen body of Jesus Christ. Beginning on Good Friday, we go through the cycle of death to life. We start again on Easter Day because it shows all the stuff that Jesus has been saying, that he defeats death, that we no longer need fear oblivion, that there is a purpose and a plan. It's all true. And it all comes down to what we have when a little child takes its Easter egg. The tomb is empty. This is what we're talking about on Easter morning. God was raised from the dead. And one day, if you believe, you will too. Amen.
Amen.
Friends, would you please stand and